Hello, welcome to Transgenerational Dialogue India and the World. I'm Dr. Gargi, and today with me I have Urvat and Dr. Rajesh. Today's topic is a broad topic that we see all around the world, and of course, especially in India, that is right versus left. What we have come to a conclusion after a lot of thinking is that we, both of the classes, the right and the left, or the right leaning or the left leaning class, tend to have a specific ideology or a specific profile of people associated with them. So, after going into a lot of brainstorming, what we have named today's episode is Right versus Left, a conflict of class. Going further on, I would want Urvak to introduce us to what we thought is an ideal profile of a left leaning or a right leaning person in India and in general the world, and what do we infer from it. Yes, Urvak.
So, from the discussions we had, I guess there was a general consensus uh, uh, that largely the most privileged class of the society and the underprivileged class of the society, both these classes are left leaning, while the middle classes and especially the first generation middle classes are right leaning. So yeah, and we can say that one of the biggest reasons why that is the case is because the middle class and especially the first generation middle class has seen a very great shift in their economic status from their childhood to when they enter their working life, and they have seen that change because they have worked for themselves. They are very hardworking and they have progressed on their own behalf, and they have, and I guess that's the reason they are very right leaning, supporting a smaller government so that they can reduce the obstacles, because they believe that each person has the ability to progress himself. At the same time, that kind of change has not been seen for, say, the privileged class, and higher classes are largely, or maybe a large portion of it is uh, going in their generations. So what they think is that whatever privilege a person has is just comes from their birth, or uh, just comes, right? Not due to what you do, and because of that they think that okay, the government should do something about, say, rest of the people who don't have that privilege from their birth, and at the same time the underprivileged class, they have not seen that change in their life, and they think that that change does not exist because we are in the position where we cannot help ourselves. So that was, I guess, the general consensus.
True. Dr. Rajesh, do you agree with this?
Yes, largely I very much agree with Urvat that uh, it is observed that mm, mm, many people from the privileged class, or you can say the one which is getting right now the name like establishment or the Lutens in India or so, these are the people who are left leaning in general. This left leaning can be uh, genuine or just to make a security around their privileges what they are having, uh, but largely they are left leaning, and also the underprivileged class which has not yet sought the opportunity to progress and climb the economic ladder. They are still looking for an opportunity to get something like that, and for that also they still have this feeling that the government can provide everything to them to climb the economic ladder, whereas the middle class, which is largely relying on individual brilliance, with which they achieve a higher status of life, like how Rog was telling that in this life, them, from the childhood to now, this first generation middle class has seen a large shift in their economic uh, upgradation. And because of this, they very much believe in individual freedom, individual liberty, and they do not go for the all-empowered government, which is providing everything they need. But they have a self-belief that whatever they need for their economic upliftment, they themselves can achieve it. So I very much agree with Urvag in that.
True. So all of us kind of in general do agree to the consensus. What I really want to talk about the fact is that also along with the privileged class, uh, the very thing that can take a person forward, a very straightforward thing which essentially takes anybody forward into the economic ladder is education, right?
Mhm.
Probably the neo middle class or the neo rich class that has come into existence has, in a large majority of the cases, has come from education or a higher education. And again, these people are the ones who are like the first generation educated people as well. Now, looking throughout the world, what we see in the larger institutions, whether they are government, non government, educational, non educational, any established institution of repute generally tends to be a left leaning ideology.
Mhm.
Anybody going to a good college in their respective countries or even in India will largely have a professor and a general culture which abides to a left leaning structure. What do you think how has that impacted the neo middle class? Do you really think that that education system has kind of failed to imbibe that left leaning structure into this new entrance into the system? Urvak?
So it could be that the inherently just because you are educated means that you would, I guess, again, that's a privileged class there when you're talking about, say, the university professors or something like that. That
Mm,
you are talking about a class which is privileged, and
mm,
I guess a lot of, especially in the social sphere, the left leaning ideology is that I will tell you what to do, right? So the
mm,
people who are educated kind of think that yes, I know what you should do because I'm educated and I'm better than others, whatever. So they would go for this kind of, especially in the social sphere when it comes to kind of left wing ideology.
mm.
And I guess, did you bring about religion in this
No.
religious? Okay, so maybe that's the next topic. But yes, so I guess generally that is the case because again, that's a privileged class many times. The people who are studying in the, say, the top universities of a country, that is a privileged class many times.
True. What do you think, Dr. Rajesh?
Mhm. Uh, I'm generally believing that there is a goodness in the people's heart, so they want to do something good for others, and especially when they achieve some education or they get some monetarily upliftment of their uh, economic status. At that time, they want to do good to the society, and at the same time, they think that I'm the smarter one, and I have the solution. I find out solution for my own life, and maybe I can also provide solution to others. So this thing comes in privileged class also, and they want to do something good to others.
Mm,
Somehow the left-leaning ideology or the Marxism or communist ideology uh, has started with this good idea of providing to the downtrodden what they were missing in the life. Okay, but the so-called leftist or socialist politicians, like if you see just they have a history of 70, 80 years, and we can see that how well they function, this kind of governments and dictators or whatever it is. And like being a socialist state, the state has the responsibility to provide about the welfare of the individual to the individual, and this individual can be provided, for instance, the food, shelter, and the medical needs, right?
Right.
Uh, this is classic thing, but if you can only establish the uh, real social upliftment of downtrodden people in India, for instance, only after 70 years. Although right from beginning you are telling we are a socialist state, but this privileged class never implemented their socialist ideology and philosophy into the uh, practical work, which can really help these people. Like right now, people are getting the shelter in the terms of this Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana or something like that, and now they are getting also benefit of health, no, which was not available to them all these 70 years. So this what I would say that it is not that the education has failed, that this middle class who are first generation educated people, they did not become left wing, but they saw the failure of the left leaning governments years after years across the world, you see.
Mm-hmm.
And when they saw the failure, and at that time they saw also the success model of America, which was largely a capitalist and opportunity based society, so they lean towards the right, because irrespective of whatever party you will see in United States, like a Republican Party is left, definitely right-wing party, and the Democratic Party is also centrist right party. It is not exactly the left party, but
Mm-hmm.
still they adhere to the principle of capitalist and
More
other.
towards the left side amongst the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, among two, but still, it is not classic left what we find in Europe or Russia or India or somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
No,
True.
so this is why I think the people, first generation people who middle class people who came out of through the education, they saw the failure of this leftist leaning government and all, and that's why across the globe they started choosing right wing government from Japan, Australia, India, UK, Germany, or uh, in America. No? So in America, in fact, they choose Trump as a representative, who is like a privileged class person, coming from a very nice home background, in family background and all. He did not went through the struggle what these majorly people, middle class Americans are going through, right? But still, these middle class Americans, they accepted him as a leader
Mm-hmm.
because he was talking about their aspiration, their goal, and other things. No?
Right.
So I think this is why this is just reflecting that the middle class failed to buy the brownie points which leftists were trying to sell to them, and then they went for the right wing. Yeah.
Very true, Dr. Rajesh. I really do agree that they failed to sell it to the new middle class because middle class was already having a good grip on what is the reality, and they couldn't be sold a theoretical picture of leftist
Yeah,
government.
especially I think the innovation of internet and availability of internet to everyone opened the gates, and people got more information than what was available through the normal media.
Even before that, I guess even TVs did that for India. Even
Yes,
before wherever
sure,
internet,
sure.
which is pretty recent and not even totally penetrated.
Mhm.
Another thing that I also see around, at least for the Indian context, is that initially when we had independence, we only had these major institutions which were probably established during the British time or maybe just around the independence time, and they were the only places to get education from. Then, as the country progressed and you come to say 1980s to 90s, you also had another breed of educational institutions which were not like government established or not that old established system. So these newer institutions which came about didn't necessarily feed a strong leftist food to
Yeah.
their students. So what I do find, especially in my generation or maybe a generation before me as well, that it really did matter as to what kind of an educational system you came from. If you did go to a really old school or a really old kind of a college with a very established system in place, you are more likely to be a left leaning person, even if you do not come from a privileged class. I mean, you might be coming from a class which is, say, a little older middle class, right? Not really a first gen, but maybe a second generation middle class. And then you have this newer kind of schools and a newer kind of colleges which were not that established, a cultural left establishment, which gave rise to a new breed of students, a new breed of educated people who were not that left leaning. So
Yeah.
right now you do have and again those people did cater to a large number of population. So I think in totality now we have a large number of educated people as well who are not left leaning.
Okay.
So let's go on further and talk about how what is what are the basis of origins of this middle class population, and on what basis they have followed this value system or a certain characteristic that this new class has, and how does it play out in their wording structure or their thinking patterns and everything around. So, Urvak, what do you have to say about the origins of this new middle class and the values, correlation of values associated with this middle class?
So of course, middle class values are very strong because I guess middle class depends on values to maintain their status, right? Because the privileged class, they can afford to not have that much kind of discipline or whatever, but middle classes is always on the brink of falling, right? So they do have a very strong value system. But I suppose that is a more traditional value system in the sense that uh, it's not a very it's an old value system, I suppose, right? So you can see that in their political ideologies, where you uh, see them voting right wing, and you see the right wing has, socially speaking, a very old kind of thinking, where it is whatever they're conservative, right? Socially conservative. So
Mm-hmm.
even though their value system has uh, it is in their traditional values that they are strong and they have progressed because of, right? So this have very traditional values as compared to, say, a privileged class which can afford to change their thinking, and because they are not dependent on that, and therefore they have a newer thinking and of course you can see that left wing thinking is a newer thought process, like historically speaking. And
So, do you mean to say that the right wing has a more of a refined or a forward kind of opinion when it comes to the economic perspective of things, while the cultural perspective of things or the in general social aspects of things they tend to be a little more backward than their economic thinking counterpart?
So when it comes to economics, really, I guess nobody really learns about real economics. Like nobody really talks about economic principles or whether new economic principles are better or old, right? It's just
But
mainly,
just in general, their economic preferences around, how they.
yes, basically it is a coincidence. That's what I'm saying. That it is not that they are economically more educated and they choose a better option, but it's rather that it's a coincidence that the traditional values support the kind of economics that we have seen kind of working in many places, or is newer, right? But it's not that uh, they are supporting it because of the merits of the system, right? So I guess it's more social. It's a social decision to even support. It's difficult to explain.
No,
uh,
So,
what you're saying.
let me rephrase my question. That that the right wing always tends to support a newer economic policy or a newer kind of economic system that has come into play, which can be invented, while for the rest of the aspect of a social and cultural aspect and the social fabric of the of their surrounding, they do prefer the older system around that.
No, they prefer older system for both economic and for social perspective.
Okay, all right. What do you think, Dr. Rajesh?
No, what Urvag is telling is quite right in some sense, but at the same time, there is also little nuance in that.
Mm.
What he's saying is that economical or cultural values of the newer middle class is basically quite much conservative type,
Mm.
and this is quite right because uh, like for instance, this leftist government and establishment had not given them economic freedom in the sense of that the working capital for the business or their entrepreneurship was
Mm.
not available.
Mm.
So in India, basically, this new middle class had relied on the social capital, like for instance, caste or like that, where they got the economic support or the labor support or whatever it was required for their new uh, economic and new economic uh, new economic steps what they have taken for the business or something like that. So they got the labor also from the family or caste or village what they know, and also like for instance they got also the money. Like at that time it was not possible for you to go to the government run bank in India to get a credit for your business. It was impossible. And so what Urvag is telling is quite right in the sense of India that they rely more on economic, also the conservative side. But for instance, in America, the new middle class, they for them the capital was available through the bank and all. No, so they were not having uh, such a conservative approach of the old economy or something, but at the same time they very much rely on the individual brilliance and their own ability to come out of the class. And because of this I think they are more forward looking economic wise, because leftist government, irrespective of what kind of government was never providing these capitalist opportunities which was available in the new economy what you are telling, right? So but now slowly this you can also say that China, even though the leftist state, but it is mostly capitalist dictatorship ruled by one party. Okay, so it is a one-party state, but still it is a capitalist. I don't consider China communist because they want to progress economically. So uh, even though being conservative at the beginning of their economic ladder climbing, they are also embracing the new ways of economy, like Chinese middle class pick up the nuance of the banking sector and other things very fast. And it is also happening slowly also in India, with everybody has Jan Dhan account and everything. So slowly the microcredits are available from the government is providing for anyone who wants to open some entrepreneurship or something. So this is the way it is progressing slowly. Maybe in the rich country, the economic progression of the middle class towards the new economic arrangements was much more faster. In economically backward country, it is slower. But I think the country is moving. All the countries are moving towards the new economic tools which are available, like for instance, banking sector,
True.
investment,
Yes, so
investment.
So this is the very point that I want to make, is that they
Yeah,
are definitely a lot more open to new economic reforms and the newer ways that the economy has to offer. Say, for example,
yeah.
reforms in the banking sector or
Yeah.
whatever that means, right?
Whereas this privileged class, they want to keep the economic situation of the society as it is because they are the advantage, and they don't want to
So
lose this
this
advantage.
is the same question that I wanted to ask you. That just let me finish and come back to you. Look, uh, yes, the same thing. That's the very point of the thing, that they are really accepting of new things in the economic system, very forward looking as far as the economic system is concerned. This new middle class, right?
Yeah.
While as opposed to that, what the point about that I was making is that around the social and the cultural aspects of things, they are not as forward looking as they
Yeah.
are around the economic things.
Yeah, because their social
This
and
is that
cultural,
was my question.
yeah. So their social and cultural values are quite conservative because it relies on the religion, family, and old style. So it is there, but
Yeah.
they
As,
economically
but
they have embraced.
in contrast to that, the financial values or the economic values are much more forward or much more
Definitely, I agree. Yeah.
refined. And yes, Uruk,
So
what were you saying?
yes,
Hmm.
so we just want to clear this up, right?
Hmm.
That different words, that
Hmm.
what are the new economic thinking and what is the modern economic thinking,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
let's say I am not really sure. I'm not an expert, of course, but if you ask economists in general, they would support free economics, right? In general, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Suppose so that's the modern way of thinking amongst academics,
Hmm.
but not a new thinking. From the time economics was developed, in general, people are supporting a freer system.
Hmm.
So while this government controlled kind of more socialist or communist kind of system is a newer system, but it
Hmm.
is not a modern system because it had not been academically accepted.
Yeah.
So I guess there was this confusion when we were talking that we are saying that I said that uh, that the middle class is conservative, right? In
Hmm.
conservative in both socially
Hmm.
and economically, because the old economic thinking is the modern economic thinking, but it is not the new economic. So
Mhm.
I guess
Yeah,
we
it was
got
about terminology. Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Oh, good. True. Thanks. All right. So let's move on to a different aspect of that. While we are just discussing the cultural aspects and the social aspects of things, what do you think is the change in the value system around the family roles or the family structure? Has there been a change that you see amongst people who have migrated from poor to middle class, as opposed to the ones who are really rich from generations maybe? What are the difference in the family values, and do you at all see them changing?
Um, should I? Yes.
Uh, uh, let's take Dr. Rajesh first.
Okay. Uh, I think the family values are changing for the middle class throughout the world.
Uh,
Uh, Earlier, mostly the half of the workforce, that is women, they were
uh,
not working.
uh,
Uh, but now more and more women are coming into the economic sphere, economic activities.
uh,
So they are taking up many roles in the
uh,
economy,
uh,
and so there is a huge difference of uh, the gender roles is happening.
uh,
Uh, At the same time, for middle class, lower income group, it is absolutely essential for both the uh, family members, means husband and wife, which is a nuclear family, which is now the classic way how middle class is defined throughout the world, I guess. And so both, in order to sustain the family in a nice way, both has to work because one salary is not enough. Whereas among the rich class, still I think there is no change because even in Germany, you can find out that among the rich class, there are more women who are staying at home. and like that, because for them it does not make difference if one person is earning good enough for what two persons can earn. Their economic status is not going to change or like that. So this is the difference, that nuclear families are more, the women are working more throughout the world in the economy, and that's the change I think.
So you mean to say that nuclear families are just a new thing for the middle class and not really a phenomenon for the rich or the poor?
Mm, not exactly. Like nuclear families are uh, maybe in India the social change is also to observe is on the slow rate, but I think the direction is not different from the world. Direction is also same. So whether you are poor or whether you are middle class or you are rich, the nuclear family is more and more in thing. You know. But the thing is that what I was saying was that uh, for many of the rich people, if some of the family members are not uh, economically active, no, it does not make difference because they are earning mostly their money from the capital or something. Whereas for the middle class, it's a big thing. You know? So that was my point.
True, very true. What do you have to say on this?
Sometimes it feels, I'm not sure, but sometimes it feels that the real middle class, if you say lower middle class, middle class, they are sometimes more conservative, especially in certain cases, such as Dr. Rajesh said, about say women working in the workforce. So you can see that a lot of the underprivileged classes, they have to work, right? They maybe don't have any options, or they might be more. Sometimes they're more accepting of women working in the workforce, right? So I suppose even though their middle class does a lot of progress in any kind of objectively wrong things about our society, because they are usually more educated, but there are certain things where if it's not obviously wrong, or if where they might be more conservative, because again, that's what made them successful, being adherent to their values, right? So
Mm.
even though because of education they are better from the rest of the society, they are more progressive than rest of the society, but they might still have some strong values where, such as say, you know, a lot of the middle classes might not prefer women to work in the workforce, uh, while a lot of the underprivileged classes where women, it's normal for women to work in the workforce. So sometimes it feels maybe the even the upper levels of the middle class are having this culture of both men and women working, or kind of it's a later thing maybe. What do you think about this?
Maybe it's later. Yes, it's a later. It just it's like a spectrum which kind of begins from the lower middle class and not really the poor class. Because poor class women do work, I think, outside their homes, and then as soon as you move on to a lower middle class and a middle class, I think it's a part of their reputation to. I mean, it kind of, at least in India, it works against their reputation to have the women working outside the homes. So there you yeah, certain yeah, there is a certain middle class and a low middle class which does not want their women to be working outside just to prove that they have essentially migrated from a poor class to the middle class. And then you of course have some people in the middle class who just really want to go forward and more above the middle class towards the higher context, and they again are more accepting of women working and contributing more to the economic spectrum of the family.
Yes, I think that can be
Yes, just
case in the terms of India, but overall, generally, I still believe that there is a progress towards more and more women in the workforce throughout the world. You know?
True.
And it is just a matter of time that even in India, this middle class will catch up, and more women of middle class also will be working.
True. I think that also has to do a lot with overall progress of or the
Yes,
economic again overall economic prosperity of
yes, definitely.
country. True. But what I wanted to talk about more is about the family structure and not just about the women in the
Uh,
family. As far as I have seen people around me, I do see that the nuclear system is definitely more preferred only in the middle class system. Again, the higher class families uh, still do not really detach as much from the family as middle class people do, right? So poor class, of course, because they cannot afford a separate housing or a separate boarding, they do stay together.
yeah, yeah,
Higher class is in a position to have a separate housing for each independent unit. But even if they do, they are kind of more connected to the family system because um, they have their wealth linked and a lot to do with division of that and
yeah,
it's
possible.
inherited and stuff. So a lot of times I do see middle class families very detached from their extended families or their parental system because they are capable of running their own independent units, while the poor and the rich are not so detached from their parent or their extended families or that structure, so as to say. Okay, moving on, let's talk about women in particular that we were saying. In general, the right wing doesn't hold a good reputation about being gentler or kinder towards women. I have been actually reading comments and just a general opinion that exists that if you are a feminist, you ought to be a leftist, or right wingers can only be a pseudo feminist or not feminist in true sense. Uh, what do you have to say on that, Dr. Rajesh?
Yeah, yeah, this is quite controversial thing. Like you said, that it is generally people are assuming that if you are left wing, that means you are a liberal,
Hmm.
and if you are liberal, that means you are also for the upliftment of women, or maybe you are for the feminism. Quite
Hmm.
positive thinking, and also a large part of the right wing is also very religious, coming from a very conservative background,
Right.
and that's why they might not be holding the uh, values of the feminism, what feminism is offering about women.
Hmm.
Uh, so it can be like this, that in fact in many of the things, maybe uh, I'm I'm considering myself on the right to the center,
Hmm.
but at the same time, like in many of the things, I find that I'm in more cohesive line, like for instance with the left,
Hmm.
and I think feminism is something where I completely agree with many of the things what from leftists are telling, but I believe that how to tell, leftists have tendency to own it.
Hmm.
Own it means when you are a social scientist or you are an academician and you coin a new term, and then
Hmm.
you own it that it belongs
Hmm.
to me. No, so I think this is quite wrong in the sense that you can be dharmic and religious, and at the same time you can be environmentalist. At the same time you can be uh, atheist, but you can be right wing, and you don't have conservative values what religion offers.
Hmm.
So there are like many mixed things. Like for instance, I will tell you something, that in India, people who call them leftist or liberal, they are telling that constitution is sacrosanct and we should stick to it. Okay, but in Europe, if somebody is telling constitution is sacrosanct and we cannot change it, not to change is conservative.
Hmm.
We don't call them, we don't call them that they are
Hmm.
liberal. Okay, And
True.
here the liberals don't speak like this. But in India, the liberal speaks like this. The constitution, the creator of the constitution, that personality who created the constitution is
Mhm.
sacrosanct. And whatever his word is, we should adhere to. Okay. And
True.
not listen to the wish of the people. So it is, this boundary of left and right is also very
Blurred
blurred.
at times.
And
Mm.
it is changing. Like for instance, in the France,
Mm.
Marie Le Pen, no, which is a left-wing leader. For us European, we consider her a left-wing leader. Okay,
Mm.
but everywhere in the newspaper, when they are writing about her, even the newspaper of Europe and America, they project her as a right-wing person. No,
Mm.
because she talks very passionately about France and the French people, and she's anti-immigrant.
Mm.
Okay, but she's left wing. For France
Mm.
and Europe, we completely understand, and her party's name is also left wing party. So, so it's very difficult to understand who has a boundary where and how we understand this. You know.
True.
So it is possible that you can be even right wing and you have a very modern outlook about the social changes in the society and especially about women. And you can be also left wing, like for instance, my wife comes from the Soviet Union, which was a communist country. And when I listen the stories of her mother, who were like born and raised in the communist country, you know, and the struggle which they went through, that in the name of the equality, the women were forced to do many things which they personally would not like to do. You know?
Mm.
So there should be a limit. Like I think I'm more like a libertarian values that you should give a liberty for the woman to decide what she wants. No.
That is again true. The question is not your personal belief. It's just
Yeah.
about the belief that left wingers tend to be more
Yes.
feminist than the right wing. What do
Yes.
you
Right. That's the
have to
case
say on the
because
general belief?
right now that's the case because majority of the right winger are still having a lot of religious background throughout the world. No.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, and because of this, I think they do not think progressive about women. Like in many of the countries, like you will be surprised to know that in 1974 was Switzerland. In Switzerland, women got the voting right in 1974. That's not very far, no? And in Liechtenstein, it's a country in Europe, and there the woman got the voting rights in 1983,
Hmm.
and that also through the referendum. And in referendum, 51% wanted women to vote and 49 did not want it to vote. So I think we are going towards a progressive way, and I completely agree with you that in the right wing there are more people who are not able to give economic freedom to the woman, or to give the liberty to woman to be herself and make her own decisions in life in general.
Hmm. What do you have to say on
Yes, so like the entire discussion about this entire discussion, I guess the way I see it is by some kind of a selection bias. So essentially, if yeah, middle class is basically underprivileged class who rose to in prosperity, right? So and so we have to look at what reasons were there for their progress, and the reason was, in my opinion, adherence to values, right? So I guess there might be difference between the kind of the first wave uh, of middle class which came earlier, uh, for which time the social values were not that um, mm, supportive to women. Okay, like if you say like in the past, right? What's the best values a family can have? They are not very good for women. Okay, they are not very feminist. But today, slowly, that is changing, right? So, I guess what even earlier when we were talking about that, there was the middle class is kind of conservative in case of letting women work in the workforce. But we kind of don't see it in some of the places where in some of the middle class families we have women working, and that might be the reason the family is middle class, because there is the double income, right? So maybe whatever the first generation middle class has the best values of their time, kind of. Do you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I
Therefore,
understand. Yeah.
that's the reason middle class right now and the right wing that they support does not have a, a, a very feminist ideology, because the major portion right now is of people who who are adhering to the values which are not very feminist, uh, because of which they are in the middle class. So maybe that is
Are you
changing.
saying that being feminist makes you rich?
Yes, for the middle class, yes. Because if you're feminist, you will let women work and kind of have a better family structure, and that helps. Yes.
It helps in social mobility.
Yeah.
Okay,
Definitely.
fine. Me as a woman has always thought that right wing definitely is not feminist, or not, of course, not as strong a feminist as a left wing is. But in general, I would say that left wing, because it is privileged, it is kind of itself in so much of comfortable position that they are kind of always ideologically trying to help the lesser privileged. So, whether it's about anything nice that is associated, and any nice value that is just gets associated with the left wing. So it's not just about empowerment of women, it's also about, say, as you said, about environment preservation,
Yeah.
or going against the religion, like being more liberal in sense of being less
Yeah.
religious or more scientific also. All of those things, all of the good values, the kindness and all of that generally gets associated with the left wing and not the right wing. And
I think it is more.
that itself also comes from a privilege, right?
Yes. Yes.
Have the
That's what
privilege to be
they have the
compassionate.
they have
Yeah.
the early advantage of coining the term, like, feminism or environmentalist or something. Many people, they do not have this kind of terminology, but they are doing the same thing. Like for instance, I was visiting South India, and there they have something like every village has something called Deva Aranya. Means it is a religious forest where they don't go and cut any branch or something. No.
Mhm.
So there is a very rich diversity of fauna and flora found there. No,
Mhm.
I would call them environmentalists, but they
Mhm.
never call them themselves as environmentalist. No. So I think it is about left wing is very conscious of coining the term and owning it, that yes, we are this.
But
Yes,
Yeah.
we
also,
are.
they are the ones who are in a position to coin anything, right?
Yes.
Let's forget about forests. Let's talk about, say, businesses, right? Let's talk on,
Yeah.
like, the main culprit, the industries, which we always
Yeah.
blame for polluting the environment and stuff. If you are just in a position to create a new industry, definitely it's not going to be in the best shape, right? There's just a lot of years going into just establishment of a certain unit, and then you kind of work on its efficiency and the betterment of that system, which includes environment preservation as well.
Yeah.
So of course the people who have established industries are in a position to make and fine tune their system according to the environmental friendly way. So it's just like that. It's just you have to be privileged in order to help someone else or have
Yeah. Yeah.
those values, right? uh, what do you have to say on this, Ulrich?
Yeah, so you are right that you need privilege. Again, it's the same thing. Many times in India, we always say that Western countries should do more about pollution because they are in a privileged position. So yes, of course,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's just a kind of donation. So only privileged people can use the donation, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
so, but again, I would like to emphasize the fact that again, it's again when we're talking about like class, right? That why is middle class not supportive of the new modern kind of thinking, such as environmental preservation,
Mm-hmm.
or or uh, or say feminism, right? And I agree that they don't support feminism, right? That right wing groups don't. Okay, and but that is again kind of that is about them sticking to their values, right? To their values that did not include environment protection. Secondly, kind of the middle class has seen the change that a lot of these things have brought up, such as industries, large use of petroleum, that has seen that has made our lives so better, right? And we go back to a place where okay, the environment would be protected, but we don't want to go back to an underprivileged kind of position, right? They've seen the benefits of pollution. So you get
Yeah,
so
in a
that
way, yeah, benefits of pollution, huh?
they have progressed due to just sticking to the old values. So they are just sticking to all the old values. They are not just picking the ones that made them progress. They are just sticking to all of it, whether it is making them progress or not, because that's what has worked, right? So they are not gonna change.
True. Do you agree, Dr. Rajesh?
Yeah, like a majority of the thing, like I said in the earlier question also, that majority of right wing is religious. So like majority of the right wing is also benefited from this kind of thing. But I believe I think there is no how to tell, there is no difference in the sense that what Urvog is telling and I am saying telling is not contradictory to each other, because Rogue is right that the right wing people are more conservative, but at the same time, when the economic upliftment of the right wing people is coming, also people are changing, and they will start using maybe taking care more about environment, using more nicer thing, like everybody who dreams about having the in Europe at least electric car and all. So people are changing, people are moving, middle class is moving. So I I believe that it's it's not something which you can put like black and white, but there is a lot of shades of gray. Yeah.
True, 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 very true. And I think all of those do come from, your wealth also has to mature, kind of.
Yeah, yeah.
So it all comes with maturity of that.
And also there are a lot of right wing thinking. I'm not sure if you have heard of this, but there are people who are saying that if we have no laws that prevent laws in of regarding environmental protection, still the industry would figure out ways to protect the environment. Or they are like this free market environmentalists, that are yes.
Yeah,
So
but let's
the
like
thing,
bring about like the very next topic that I was going to move on
so,
to. That is,
let me
yeah.
complete, please. That you can see the thinking, right? So they think that what values, the old values that had worked for them would work. That's what I'm saying. They are not thinking whether it would or not. They're just saying, oh, it worked. It brought me from an underprivileged class to middle class. Those values would work everywhere. They will also protect the environment. They will do everything. Right? So that's the thing. So that's the reason they're sticking.
True.
That's
Yeah. So what would you have to say on the basis actually of this whole right wing left wing debate? The the very main point on which they tend to argue is this free market system, that how much the business or the economic activity needs to be controlled by the government and how much say it has to have on the system. Where the right wing definitely is made of more of an aspiration and relying on themselves, and they do not want any regulation to control their steps. And so they actually oppose any kind of establishment, not just the government. I think they also challenge the establishment in the education or health or any other non-business sector as well. What do you have to say on that, Urvak? Does it really Do you have the same impression as well, that they challenge all kinds of establishments?
Left wing?
No, the right wing.
No, the right wing doesn't. So free market is. Yes. So they are critical.
So free market is a challenge to definitely the economic system in general.
So I think this is the wrong thing. I guess we don't agree on the fact that the past economic system was free market system, right? So that's not a new system, right? So it's not challenge an established system, but a strong and large government is a new system, and they are opposing the new system of a big government, right? So everything just falls into that pattern for me. I don't see why this is a different thing. The-
All right, it's not about new or old. I'm just saying that they're anti-establishment. They just basically want a change in existing system of any damn thing.
yeah,
Be it the education system also, or the health system also, or just in general the free market. That is, I'm not really sure how old it is, but the government system has been, I think, there for around 150 to 200 years, I guess.
I guess the thing that you're talking about, I guess you're talking about in the Indian political context, where the recent right-wing wave, I guess that's what you're talking about. That's kind of just India-specific thing, that we were ruled by left-wing parties for so long, and now there's a right-wing party, and therefore we are looking at this hatred of everything that was established till now, right? So I guess that is a very India specific thing that is happening. I don't think that's a very general trend all across the world. So Dr.
No,
Rajesh would
I think it is also a general trend in the sense that why do the Trump raise the slogan, drain the swamp, drain the establishment, he was against establishment. Establishment means this privileged upper class of the Luton, or the people who are in the top of the government, who are in the decision making of the society, and who are the elites of the class. So, so the middle class who is aspiring to become rich, they are feeling very much threatened by this privileged class. That privileged class will not allow the rise of their economic status, and because of this, I think they are protesting. So it is happening all around the world. Like in France, there is this yellow vest movement or anything you can see. So it was also a middle class movement. Left or right, I think it is irrespective, but I think this is the struggle of the class which is going on. That and like always, there is a, how to tell, if you look at the history from many ages, when the kingdoms were there, kings were there, nobility was there, were there was a feudal structure which was established and all. In all this, I see a general pattern that there are only two kinds of pattern. Whether you call it left or right, it is different matter. But there is a centripetal force and there is one centrifugal force. So centripetal force is the one, the all the system, whether it is economy, culture, or family, or social values and everything, is going towards the individual liberty, and there is not a state which is trying to regulate everything, and there is a centrifugal force where everything they are trying to regulate. There is a all empowering government, my bap sarkar, which is providing everything, whether you need a health, whether you need economic support or whatever. So these kind of things are happening throughout the history, that there are two different forces. Sometimes they call them right wing, sometimes they call them, label themselves as a left wing or so. But this kind of thing is happening throughout the history, and I believe that individual liberty is sometimes winning, and sometimes this centrifugal force, like for instance communist, even though they call themselves leftist, liberal, or whatever it is, but they were very much centralization. Everything, all power was centralized. The central person, central government was making decision and ruling everything. And this is what even Urvak is telling, that right now the new economic system is that very powerful government. This very powerful government is this centralization of the system, and this middle class which has rise from the experience of this left-leaning communist government, which are also based on this centralization idea, and they suffer under it, and now they want this individual liberty, centripetal force, where the power is distributed throughout the individual entities and not surrounded only to a central government, central and all powerful government. And that's why I think middle class is coming up with struggle against the any monopoly. Now, right now, the social media companies are trying to monopolize their uh, control over the freedom of speech and other things, which is enshrined in the constitution of different countries. But now these are becoming the watchdog who want to regulate everything, and the larger section of the society of the middle class is opposing it, and they will oppose it because they got the benefit of the individual liberty and capitalist society. So anything which is centralizing power, they will try to oppose. So it is quite obvious for me. Uh, Many times these people, they change their label left or right, but this power struggle between the two classes, that's what it is.
Continues. Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
it essentially is a, yeah. So what
Yeah.
I had noticed is that they uh, for a middle class person, it's really difficult to make that transition into that higher class or the elite class, right? Why largely slow? Even if, say, for example, they have taken the first step of getting educated, right? Uh, the thing is, even beyond that, when that education is supposed to give you returns and results in that social mobility and the economic mobility, there is still a non-permeability into that class, and which is beyond educational measures. This is lack of connection, lack of even exposure. It's not just the education, it's also about the exposure. If you want to like really be a skilled anything, you also first need to know what is a good product or a good service,
Yeah.
or what it is that you're specializing in. So which kind of leaves a gap even with a good education, that there's still a gap regarding that, and again a lack of supportive resources. For example, a privileged person can easily concentrate for 8 hours or 9 hours into straight into his work, like with the same kind of establishment. But for like a middle class person, he has things to take care of at home, or other social responsibilities that are on that person itself. The like output can be a little lower than the privileged person, right? So all of this, I mean, the new middle class has kind of started the futility of even the educational measures, because it's really not getting you to the higher class. It's only kind of getting you to from a lower class to a comfortable middle class. And that's why the people who are presently into the middle class system tend to question this establishment. Even amongst anything, even of course, I started to talk what happens after you get educated. But even like for America and stuff, people are questioning that why are only certain family kids are getting into Harvard or Stanford
Yeah.
or Columbia, right? It's not just about India there. And then there are people who are like, okay, Chuck Howard or Chuck Stanford, we can just come off on our own. And education, I mean, you can educate yourself, and you don't really need an established system to give you that skill, or give you that value to give back to the society. So, in general, an anti establishment sentiment that tends to prevail around the world, which is largely, I guess, probably due to middle class upsurgence. Do you have anything to add with any disagreements?
No, I think I would like to just conclude it that yes, you are quite right, and this is like the eternal game between the class. It is a just you have heard about the term called game theory.
Mm.
So this is never-ending game which is continuing, and many times I
It's
think
just a class struggle which has been disguised into the name of left and right
yes,
sometimes. It
yes,
feels
definitely,
like that.
I
Yeah.
completely agree with it. Yeah.
And I guess just to add a point to Gargi, that maybe now, because such a large middle class exists,
Mm.
middle class has started having a feeling of being underprivileged. So I guess maybe that shift is also there. That maybe they are saying, okay, now being middle class is not enough, right? Because there's so much more, right? So
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
maybe there is
So,
a shift also, maybe
so
recently
they are
that
looking for an opportunity. Yeah.
yes, we used to feel like nice, but yeah, we are in this nice position. Is now like, no, this is not the nice position.
Yeah. So in general, it is a class struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. Okay, it was a nice chat today. I guess we'll conclude at this that uh, let us know in the comments if you really feel that left and right is essentially a class struggle and not a struggle of ideology, essentially, right?
Okay, thank you, Gagi.
Until we see you next time, goodbye, Urva. Goodbye, Dr. Rahul.
Thank you.